Neve's bare feet hit frozen ground the moment the Alpha King's eyes found hers across the bonfire. She didn't remember making the decision to run. One moment she stood in the ceremonial circle, the sacred wolf's bane wreath heavy against her temples, and the next her legs were carrying her away from the flames, away from the chanting, away from the mate bond she'd been raised since birth to accept. Behind her, the ceremony shattered into chaos. She heard Castor, her intended, her arranged mate, the beta her parents had promised her to, roar her name in fury and humiliation. Heard the elders' shocked gasps, the pack's confused murmurs rising to a crescendo of disbelief. But louder than all of it was the sound of her own heartbeat, thundering in her ears as she crashed through the forest beyond the sacred grove. Run, just run. The winter forest tore at her ceremonial gown, the thin white silk offering no protection against thorns and branches. Her feet, bare as tradition demanded for the ceremony, screamed in protest against rocks and frozen roots. Blood bloomed in her wake, small crimson offerings to the uncaring earth. She didn't care. Pain was nothing compared to what she was fleeing. The memory of Castor's hands on her waist during the pre-ceremony rituals made her stomach turn. The way he'd gripped too tight, his fingers pressing bruises into her skin while he whispered what he'd do to her after the bond was sealed. How he'd laughed when she'd flinched, how he'd told her she'd learn to like it, that all mates did eventually. No, not him. Never him. Behind her, the forest erupted with howls. They were coming. Neve pushed herself harder, her lungs burning with each gasping breath. She had no plan, no destination. The Shadowpine Pack's territory stretched for miles in every direction, and she knew every patrol route, every border, A massive shape exploded from the darkness to her left. Neve screamed and veered right, her feet sliding on pine needles. The wolf, enormous and gray, one of Castor's personal guards, snapped at her heels, herding her like prey. She could hear others now, crashing through the undergrowth, their growls creating a symphony of threat. The forest opened suddenly into a ravine. Neve skidded to a stop at the edge, stones tumbling into the darkness below. The drop was at least 30 feet to the rocky stream bed. Behind her, the wolves emerged from the trees, forming a semicircle that trapped her against the cliff. Castor's wolf stood at the center, larger than the others, his rust-colored fur bristling with rage. When he shifted, the transformation was violent, angry, bones cracking with deliberate slowness that made Neve's stomach churn. "You dare!" Castor snarled, his naked body steaming in the winter air as he stalked toward her. "You humiliate me in front of the entire pack? In front of the king?" Neve pressed back against empty air, her heels at the ravine's edge. "I won't be your mate," she said, hating how her voice shook. "I won't. You don't have a choice." His hand shot out, catching her wrist in a crushing grip. The ceremony was already begun, the vows spoken. "You belong to me now, and I will teach you what that means." The other wolves growled their approval, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Neve saw her future in those feral gazes, a life of submission, of brutality disguised as pack law, of slowly disappearing until nothing remained but obedience. She looked down at the ravine, at the certain injury, the possible death. Then back at Castor's face, at the promise of living death in his smile. Neve jumped. For a heartbeat she flew. Wind rushed past her ears, her ceremonial gown billowing around her like wings. She heard Castor's roar of fury, heard the wolves' startled barks. Then the world tilted, and something massive slammed into her from the side. They hit the ravine wall together, rolling, and Neve felt fur against her skin, hot breath on her neck. Whatever had caught her absorbed the impact, protecting her body with its own as they tumbled down the steep slope. Rocks and branches tore at them both, and Neve squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the final crushing impact at the bottom. It never came. They landed in the stream with a tremendous splash, icy water driving the air from Neve's lungs. She surfaced gasping, her hands finding purchase on smooth river stones. The current was gentle here, barely deep enough to reach her waist, And beside her, rising from the water like something from legend, was the largest wolf she had ever seen. Its fur was pure silver white, gleaming like moonlight even soaked with water. It stood easily 4 feet at the shoulder, its massive head level with her own, as it regarded her with eyes of molten gold. This was no ordinary pack wolf. This was— oh gods, oh no. The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could crush her skull with ease. But it didn't attack. Instead, it moved closer, circling her slowly, and Neve realized with growing horror that she was being assessed, studied, hunted. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the stream's burble. "Please, I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to." The wolf's growl cut her off, low and resonant, vibrating through her bones. It completed its circle, coming to stand directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from its body despite the freezing water. This close, she could see scars beneath the silver fur. Old wounds, countless battles, a warrior's body honed to lethal perfection. And those eyes, ancient, knowing, far too intelligent to be merely animal. Above them, on the ravine's edge, Castor's voice echoed down. "Your Majesty, the girl is mad, touched by fever. She didn't know what she was doing. I beg your mercy in bringing her back." The silver wolf's snarl cut through Castor's words like a blade. The sound was primal, absolute, a declaration of dominance that needed no translation. Neve felt it in her chest, felt the raw power that rolled off the creature in waves. When Castor spoke again, his voice shook. "Of course, Your Majesty, as you command." The sound of retreat followed. Paws on stone, wolves melting back into the forest. In moments, they were gone, and Neve was alone with the creature that had saved her from the fall, or perhaps had just claimed her for itself. The wolf turned back to her, and Neve saw her reflection in those golden eyes. She looked wild, half-drowned, her ceremonial gown torn and transparent where it clung to her body. Blood from her torn feet swirled in the water around her, drawing lazy patterns in the current. She should run. She should scream. She should do something other than stand frozen while this massive predator studied her like a puzzle to be solved. But Neve found she couldn't move. Not from fear, though terror certainly sang through her veins, but from something else entirely. Something that felt like recognition, like destiny, like the moment before lightning struck. The wolf moved closer still, its muzzle nearly touching her throat. Neve felt its breath against her skin, hot and steady, felt the whisper of fangs against her racing pulse. "I won't go back," she whispered into that dangerous closeness. "Whatever you're going to do to me, however you plan to punish me for disrupting the ceremony, for disrespecting the king, I don't care. I won't go back to him." The wolf went utterly still. Then, slowly, deliberately, it pressed its forehead against hers. The touch sent electricity racing down Neve's spine, a sensation so overwhelming she gasped. The world seemed to tilt again, but this time she wasn't falling. She was being pulled toward something, into something, a connection that felt both alien and achingly familiar. Images flashed behind her eyes. A throne room carved from mountain stone, battlefields soaked in blood and moonlight, centuries of loneliness, of duty, of waiting for something, someone who never came, until now. The wolf pulled back, and Neve saw the exact moment its eyes shifted from animal to human awareness. The transformation began before she could process what was happening, before she could look away, or close her eyes, or prepare herself for what, for who, stood before her. The Alpha King was even more terrifying in human form. He towered over her, easily 6.5 feet of corded muscle and battle-scarred skin. His hair was the same silver white as his fur, long enough to brush his shoulders, framing a face that was all sharp angles and barely contained violence. But it was his eyes that trapped her, still that impossible molten gold, burning with an intensity that made her feel exposed, seen, in a way she'd never experienced. When he spoke, his voice was a dark rumble that seemed to resonate in her very bones. Mine, he said simply. And Neve felt the world she'd known shatter completely. Neve's back hit the ravine wall before she could form a response. The Alpha King hadn't moved with any apparent speed, but suddenly he was there, his hand braced against stone beside her head, caging her in place. This close, she could see water dripping from his hair, tracking down the planes of his chest, following the path of scars that told stories of violence she couldn't begin to imagine. "What did you say?" she managed. His golden eyes held hers. "You heard me. I'm promised to Castor. The ceremony was interrupted." His hand came up, hovering near her throat. "By you." "Why?" The question demanded truth. "Because I'd rather die than let him touch me." Something flickered across the Alpha King's face. Approval, maybe, or recognition. "He hurt you." It wasn't a question, but Neve nodded anyway. He was going to do worse. The growl that rumbled through his chest was purely wolf. He will answer for that. "He's a beta," Neve said bitterly. "Nothing will happen to him. Castor is not my beta. I came to your ceremony as a courtesy, not to bless a forced bonding I knew nothing about." His fingers finally made contact with her throat, trailing along her neck with devastating gentleness. "Which means you're free," hope sparked in Neve's chest. "Then you'll let me go?" "No." The word was absolute. "I don't understand," she said. "What do you want from me?" His thumb traced her jawline, tipping her face up. "I told you already. You're mine." "That's not an answer." His eyes began to glow, gold bleeding into supernatural brightness. "Claiming what's mine before anyone else can." Before Neve could protest, the Alpha King lowered his head to her throat. The first brush of his lips against her pulse point sent electricity through her veins. The second made her knees buckle. By the third, she was gripping his shoulders, not to push away, but to hold on. "This will hurt," he murmured against her skin, his voice rougher now. "But it will also save you. Do you trust me?" "I don't even know your name." She felt him smile. "Theron." Then his teeth sank into her flesh. Pain exploded through Neve's body, white-hot and all-consuming. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged. It felt like her very essence was being pulled apart, examined, claimed. But beneath the agony was something else. Heat. A connection forming, a golden thread wrapping around her heart and pulling taut. She felt him, his strength, his loneliness, his fierce protective instinct that had existed for centuries with no outlet. "Mine," his wolf whispered into her mind. "Mine. Mine. Mine." Theron's arms wrapped around her waist, supporting her weight as her body went limp. She felt his tongue against her throat, tasting her blood as the mark sealed itself. When he pulled back, Neve's vision swam. "What did you do?" "Saved you." His hand cupped her face. "A bite from an Alpha King creates a permanent mark. You can never be bonded to another now. You're under my protection. Castor can't touch you." "But a mark isn't a mate bond." "Not from a Hin King." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "What I've given you is permanent, Neve. You're mine now, in the eyes of every pack. No one can challenge it." The implications crashed over her. She'd escaped one prison only to find herself claimed by something infinitely more powerful. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, even as her body swayed toward him. "You wanted freedom." His arm tightened around her waist. "I've given it to you. No wolf will dare claim you now. Except you." Something almost like pain flickered across his features. "Except me. But I am not Castor." Before Neve could respond, her knees gave out completely. She felt Theron catch her, felt herself being lifted against his chest. "Sleep," he commanded, and the Alpha Authority made it impossible to resist. "When you wake, we'll talk. I'll explain everything." Neve tried to fight it, but the combination of shock, blood loss, and the overwhelming power of his mark dragged her under. "What have I done?" And from somewhere deep in her mind, riding the golden thread of their new bond, exactly what you were meant to. The journey to the royal estate was a blur. Theron carried her through the forest with supernatural speed, his wolf lending him strength and endurance no normal shifter possessed. By the time they arrived at the sprawling grounds of his territory, dawn was breaking across the horizon. Mira, his housekeeper, met them at the entrance with barely concealed shock at the sight of her king carrying an unconscious woman marked with his claim. "Prepare the guest chamber," Theron said quietly, "and send for healing supplies. She's injured." "At once, Your Majesty." Mira disappeared to make arrangements. Theron carried Neve to a room overlooking the eastern gardens, laying her gently on silk sheets. The mark on her throat had already begun to heal, faster than it should, even for a wolf. The Alpha King's claim was working through her system, strengthening her, changing her in ways neither of them fully understood yet. He stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, before finally forcing himself to leave. He had given her his mark. Now he had to give her time to accept what that meant. Neve woke to silk sheets and morning sunlight. For a disorienting moment, she thought the ceremony and the chase and the bite had all been nightmare. But then she tried to sit up, and her hand flew instinctively to her throat. The mark was still there. She could feel it, a slight tenderness in the skin. But when her fingers explored the wound, she found it nearly healed. Smooth flesh where Theron's teeth had pierced deep enough to bleed. The accelerated healing shocked her. Even for a wolf, this was impossible. Unless an Alpha King's mark carries his power, she realized with growing wonder and fear. "You heal fast." Neve's head snapped toward the voice. Theron stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He'd dressed since the ravine, dark pants and a simple shirt that did nothing to diminish his overwhelming presence. "Where am I?" "My territory. The royal grounds." He moved into the room with predatory grace. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours." 6 hours. Neve looked down at herself, heat rushing to her cheeks. Someone had changed her out of the ruined gown into a soft nightgown. "Did you?" "My housekeeper, Mira. She's wolf, and mated. I didn't touch you beyond what was necessary." Theron's expression was unreadable. "Despite what you might think, I'm not in the habit of taking advantage of unconscious women." The reproof stung. "I'm sorry, everything that happened was necessary." He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel his heat. "And I know you have questions. Ask them." Neve had so many she didn't know where to start, but one burned brighter than all the others. "Why me?" Theron's golden eyes searched her face. "You felt it. In the ravine, when I touched you. You felt the recognition." She had. That terrifying sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The bond between them hummed with truth. She couldn't lie to him. "What does it mean?" "It means you're my mate. My true mate. Not a chosen bond or political alliance. The mate the moon herself chose for me 3 centuries ago." Neve's breath caught. 3 centuries? You've been alive for 300 years? Longer. An Alpha King doesn't age like other wolves. I was born to rule, and I'll rule until a stronger wolf can kill me, or until I find my mate and choose to step down. His jaw clenched. I'd stopped believing she existed. The weight of that crashed over her. But I'm nobody. I'm not even ranked high. Mine. His hand cupped her cheek with devastating gentleness. "You're mine, Neve. Rank means nothing. You could be the lowest omega in existence, and you'd still be the most important wolf alive." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, warmth spread through the bond. "I don't understand any of this. Yesterday I was trying to escape one bond, and now I'm trapped in another." Pain flickered across Theron's face. "Because I will never force you to complete it." Neve blinked. "What?" "The mark I gave you protects you. It declares you mine, prevents anyone else from claiming you. But it's not a mate bond." He pulled his hand back. "A true mate bond requires both parties to bite, to claim each other willingly. I won't force that on you." "But you marked me without asking." "To save your life. If I hadn't, Castor would have completed a bond you didn't want." His voice hardened. "At least this way, you're free to choose. You can stay here, under my protection, with no expectations. Or uncertainty crossed his features. When you're ready, if you ever feel the pull between us, you can choose to complete it. And if I never want to? The pain in his golden eyes was devastating. Then you live your life, and I live mine. The mark will protect you regardless. You'll be the Alpha King's chosen, with all the privileges that entails, without the obligation of being his mate. It was more than Neve had dared to hope for. But looking at Theron now, seeing the carefully controlled longing, she realized the cost of this gift. He'd waited 300 years, and he was willing to wait forevermore. I don't know what I want, she admitted. Everything is happening too fast. Then take time. Theron stood, putting distance between them. This room is yours. The grounds are yours to explore. No one will pressure you. You're safe here. He moved toward the door, and panic fluttered in her chest. Wait. Theron paused, hope flickering across his features. What do I call you? His expression softened. Theron? Just Theron. When we're alone. Then he was gone, and Neve was left staring at the closed door, her hand pressed against the mark, feeling the bond pulse with emotions she couldn't name. Somewhere in the depths of her soul, her wolf stirred for the first time. Mate, it whispered, and Neve felt the truth resonate through every fiber of her being. She'd run from a bond she didn't want, only to find herself tied to one she hadn't known she needed, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. 3 weeks passed in a blur of confusion and steadily worsening torment. Neve had expected imprisonment or demands. What she got was freedom so complete it felt like another trap. The royal grounds were vast, hundreds of acres where she could run for hours. Mira brought meals and never asked invasive questions. The library held thousands of books. The gardens were pristine. And Theron kept his distance. She saw him sometimes from afar. Once, she'd watched from her window as he trained with his guards, taking on 3 wolves at once and defeating them with ease. Another time, she'd found him reading by the library fire, so absorbed he hadn't noticed her. She'd fled before he could look up, her heart hammering. But mostly, he stayed away, giving her space, which would have been perfect. Except Neve was slowly losing her mind. It started with the dreams. Every night, Theron came to her room. Dream Theron, who sat on her bed and talked to her in darkness. Sometimes he told stories of his long life. Sometimes he just watched her sleep. And sometimes he touched her. Neve woke from those dreams gasping, her body flushed and aching, and the phantom sensation of his hand so real she could almost believe it had happened. The mark on her throat would burn, pulsing with heat that spread through her entire body. Just dreams, she told herself. He promised to keep his distance. These are just your mind playing tricks. But the dreams intensified, and with them came the pain. It started as a dull ache in her chest, like something vital was missing. Then it spread to her bones, her muscles, every fiber crying out for something she couldn't name. The mark became hypersensitive, so tender that even her hair brushing it made her gasp. By the 3rd week, Neve could barely eat. Food tasted like ash. Sleep was impossible without the dreams, and the dreams left her exhausted. She lost weight, dark circles forming beneath her eyes. And worst of all was the need. It was physical, this craving for Theron's presence. Her body knew where he was at all times, the bond acting like a compass pointing toward him. When he was close, the ache lessened. When he left the estate, the pain became excruciating. Neve found herself pacing the halls, fighting the urge to track him down and what? Beg him to complete the bond? She had her pride. You look terrible, Mira said bluntly one morning, setting down a breakfast tray Neve knew she wouldn't touch. When's the last time you slept properly? I sleep fine, Neve lied. And when's the last time His Majesty visited your room? The question made Neve's head snap up. He hasn't. We're not. He promised space. Mira's knowing look made heat rush to Neve's cheeks. How's that working out? I'm fine. You're wasting away. The housekeeper sat on the bed. Child, I've served the king for 50 years. I know what an incomplete bond looks like. Neve's hands clenched. He said the mark wouldn't force anything. The mark doesn't force, Mira agreed. But it calls. Two halves of a soul, separated when they should be whole. The longer you fight it, the worse it gets. So what am I supposed to do? Just give in? You could try talking to him. The suggestion was so simple that Neve almost laughed. Except she couldn't, because facing Theron felt impossible. He's been avoiding me too. Oh, child. Mira's expression turned pitying. He wants. Why do you think he's staying away? It's taking everything not to go to you. The words sent a shiver through Neve. How do you know? Because I see him too. Pacing the halls at night, standing outside your door. Training until he's bloody because it's the only way he can burn off the energy. Mira stood. You're both suffering. At some point, one of you has to be brave enough to admit what you both already know. She left before Neve could respond. Neve sat in the silence, her hand pressed against the mark. Through the bond, she could feel Theron somewhere below. The pull toward him was almost unbearable. What do I already know? But deep down, where her wolf lived, she knew the answer. That night, the dreams came again. But this time, when Dream Theron reached for her hand, Neve didn't pull away. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. His golden eyes held infinite sadness. Neither can I. Then what do we do? Dream Theron leaned closer, forehead resting against hers. You already know the answer, Shalara. Shalara. The word resonated through her, and somehow she understood its meaning. My heart. Neve woke alone, tears streaming down her face. The decision crystallized, sharp and clear and terrifying. Tonight, when Theron returned from his patrol, she would find him. Tonight, she would stop running. But as she rose on, shaking legs to prepare herself, she had no idea that tonight would never come. Because someone else had plans for the Alpha King's mate, and they were already in motion. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Neve woke early, her decision from the night before burning bright in her chest. Today she would find Theron. Today she would tell him she was ready to complete the bond. But when she reached out through their connection, searching for him on the grounds, she felt only distance. He'd left before dawn. Urgent business in the northern territories that couldn't wait. Through the bond, she could feel him miles away, too far to reach quickly. Tonight then, she told herself, trying to ignore the hollow ache his absence created. When he returns. She was crossing the courtyard, lost in thought, when a familiar voice froze her in place. Well, the runaway bride. Castor emerged from behind the stables, flanked by two guards. He looked different than at the ceremony, harder, meaner, with barely contained rage simmering beneath his forced smile. What are you doing here? Neve's hand instinctively went to her throat, to the mark that should have protected her. You can't be on royal grounds. Oh, I have permission. Castor's smile widened. The king's chief advisor arranged a meeting to discuss pack relations. Imagine my surprise when I caught your scent. Neve took a step back. Theron won't allow you near me. Theron. Castor's voice dripped with mockery. Listen to you, using his name like you're equals. Like you're anything more than a disobedient Omega who spread her legs for the first powerful wolf who showed interest. The crude words hit like a slap. That's not... Please. He moved closer, his guards cutting off her escape. You think I don't know what that mark means? You let him claim you within hours of running from our bonding. He saved me from you. Neve spat, anger overwhelming fear. From being forced? Castor's hand shot out, catching her wrist in a crushing grip. Careful, Omega. That mark might protect you from being bonded to another, but it doesn't make you untouchable. The king isn't here, is he? Won't be back until tomorrow. Ice flooded Neve's veins. Let go. When the king finds out, you'll be long gone. Castor yanked her closer. See, I've been doing research. That mark? It's not a mate bond. It's just a claim, and claims can be broken. Neve's wolf snarled, pushing against her skin. That's impossible. That's what everyone thinks. But my new allies have been very informative about the old ways. His smile turned vicious. There's a ritual. Specific herbs, a blood ceremony, about 3 days. After that, the mark fades, and you'll be free for me to bond properly. What allies? Neve tried to focus past her panic. Who would... Does it matter? Castor started dragging her toward the tree line. By the time anyone realizes you're missing, we'll be at the border. Neve dug in her heels, fighting with everything she had. Help! She screamed. Someone! One of the guards backhanded her, stars exploding across her vision. She tasted blood, felt her knees buckle. No one's coming, Castor said almost gently, lifting her over his shoulder. The estate is practically empty. Through the haze of pain, Neve reached desperately for the bond. Theron? She called silently. Please. The bond stretched, distant but not severed. She felt a flicker of response. Confusion, then alarm, then rage so pure it took her breath away. But he was too far. Miles and miles away, unable to reach her in time. Castor carried her into the forest, moving faster than should have been possible. His guards kept pace, alert for pursuit that wasn't coming. I have to admit, Castor said conversationally, part of me is looking forward to this. Breaking the Alpha King's claim, there's a poetry to it. Neve's vision swam from the blow to her head. But through the pain and fear, anger began to build. She'd run from this exact fate once before. She'd survived impossible odds, been marked by the most powerful wolf alive, all to avoid being Castor's prisoner. She wasn't giving up now. Her wolf surged forward, lending her desperate strength. Neve twisted in Castor's grip, her teeth finding his shoulder. She bit down. Not with the power of a dominant wolf, but with the frantic desperation of prey refusing to die quietly. Castor cursed, more surprised than hurt, and his grip loosened just enough. Neve hit the ground and ran. Behind her, she heard his furious snarl, heard his guards giving chase. But Neve didn't look back. She ran wild and desperate and refusing to surrender. Theron! She called again through the bond. Please! The response was immediate and overwhelming. Rage and fear and fierce protectiveness flooded through their connection, along with something that felt like a command. Hold on, I'm coming. But even as relief crashed over her, Neve's foot caught on a root. She went down hard, the impact driving air from her lungs. Before she could rise, rough hands grabbed her arms. Stupid bitch! Castor snarled, his shoulder barely bleeding from her desperate bite. That's going to cost you. His fist connected with her temple, and the world exploded into darkness. Neve's last conscious thought was of Theron, of golden eyes and gentle touches and the mate bond she'd been too afraid to complete. I'm sorry, she thought as consciousness fled. I'm so sorry I waited too long. Neve woke to the smell of wolfsbane and blood. Her head throbbed where Castor had hit her, her vision swimming as she tried to focus. She was in a cellar, old stone walls covered in symbols she didn't recognize. Candles burned in a circle around her, their flames casting dancing shadows that made the carved runes seem to writhe. She tried to move and discovered her wrists were bound above her head, chained to the ceiling. Her feet barely touched ground, her whole weight hanging from her arms. The position made her shoulders scream. Ah, you're awake! A voice emerged from shadows, older, cultured, touched with an accent she couldn't place. Excellent timing. We're almost ready to begin. An elderly man in ancient robes stepped into candlelight. His eyes were milky white, blind, but they seemed to track her movement with unnerving accuracy. Who are you? Aldrich, former advisor to the Alpha King, before he grew soft. The old man moved closer, fingers trailing across carved symbols. Before he forgot the old ways. The king's chief advisor, Neve realized, blood running cold. You're the one who let Castor onto the grounds. Clever girl. Aldrich smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. I've been waiting centuries for an opportunity like this. The great Theron, brought low by his own weakness. He'll kill you, Neve said with certainty, when he gets here. If he gets here. Castor emerged carrying a silver bowl reeking of wolfsbane. The ritual takes 3 hours. Even pushing his wolf to supernatural speeds, he can't cover the distance in less than 2. By the time he arrives, you'll be mine. Neve pulled against her chains. This won't work. We can't break an Alpha King's mark. Aldrich approached with the bowl. But the old magic can. He dipped his fingers in the bowl, pulling them out coated in a black substance that smoked faintly. When he touched it to the mark on Neve's throat, agony exploded through her body. She screamed. The pain was ice, creeping through her veins like poison. She felt the bond stretch to breaking, felt Theron's answering roar of fury through their connection. No, she thought desperately, I won't let you break it. The more you fight, the more it hurts, Aldrich said almost kindly. Accept it, child. But through the pain, Neve felt something else. Theron, racing toward her with supernatural speed. She felt his wolf fully unleashed, tearing across the miles, felt his absolute refusal to lose her. Hold on, his voice came through the bond. Fight them, Shalara. I'm almost there. He's coming, Neve gasped, forcing a smile through her agony. You have less time than you think. Castor's expression darkened. Then we'll speed this up. He grabbed a silver knife from the altar. The ritual calls for the mate's blood mixed with wolfsbane. Once that's done, the mark breaks. He approached, the blade gleaming, and Neve felt ice-cold terror. This was real, and Theron might not make it. I'm sorry, she thought toward him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Tell me what? Theron's voice, rough with rage, came from the cellar entrance. Everyone spun toward the sound. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, magnificent and terrifying. His eyes blazed pure gold, his body radiating power that made the candle flames gutter. Blood covered his clothes, not his own, the guards. Impossible, Aldrich breathed. You couldn't have. I can do a lot of things when properly motivated. Theron's attention fixed on Neve, on the chains, on the black poison on her throat. His expression promised death. Let her go. Or what? Castor moved behind Neve, a knife suddenly at her throat. You'll kill me? That won't save her. One slice and the bond breaks forever. Theron went utterly still, every muscle locked. Aldrich, you have 5 seconds. He never finished. Theron moved faster than thought, crossing the cellar in a blur. He caught Castor's wrist before the knife could descend, twisting with casual brutality until bone snapped and the blade clattered to stone. Castor's scream echoed. Theron threw him aside, catching Neve before her chains could take her weight. I've got you, he murmured, hands infinitely gentle as they worked the chains loose. You're safe now. Neve collapsed into his arms, the poison still burning but fading with each second. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling their bond pulse and strengthen. Theron, she whispered. I was going to tell you. This morning, I was coming to find you. I know. His lips pressed to her forehead. I felt it through the bond. I felt everything. Behind them, Aldrich began chanting in ancient language. Theron's head snapped up, expression shifting to pure fury. Enough. The command made the cave shake. Power rolled off him in waves, ancient and absolute. Aldrich's chanting cut off with a choke. He fell to his knees. Your Majesty, please. You tried to break a mate bond. You tortured my mate. Theron's voice was death itself. There is no mercy for that. What happened next was swift and final. Neve closed her eyes, pressing harder into Theron's chest as he dealt justice. She heard Castor's pleas, Aldrich's final curse, and sounds of violence she didn't want to witness. Then silence. It's over, Theron said softly. Open your eyes, Shalara. Neve did, finding they were alone now. The mark, she said suddenly, hand flying to her throat. The poison. Did they break it? No. Theron's fingers traced the mark gently, and warmth flooded through her. His power, burning away the last traces of poison. They came close, but the bond held. You held it. You fought for it. For us. I did, Neve admitted. Because I realized something. I've been an idiot. A small smile tugged at his lips. Oh? I've been so focused on what I was running from that I didn't see what I was running toward. Her hands fisted in his shirt. I don't want space anymore, Theron. I don't want distance. I want... What? His voice was rough with hope. Tell me. She met his golden eyes, letting him see everything she'd been hiding. You, she whispered. I want you. I want to complete the bond. I want to be yours in every way. Theron's breath caught. You're sure? After everything? I'm sure. Neve pulled him closer. I've never been sure of anything. The kiss that followed was inevitable. Theron's lips met hers with gentleness that belied his earlier violence, treating her like spun glass. But Neve didn't want gentle. She'd been running too long. She bit his lower lip, not hard enough to draw blood, but hard enough to make him growl. Nev, he warned, voice dropping to that dark rumble. If you keep doing that, then what? She nipped at his jaw. What will you do, Alpha King? His answering growl was pure predator. Everything. Theron carried Neve from the cellar like she weighed nothing. She expected him to take her back to the estate, but instead he headed deeper into the forest, to where ancient trees grew so thick their canopy blocked out the sky. Where are we going? Somewhere sacred. His voice was rough, barely human. Somewhere worthy. They emerged into a clearing Neve had never seen. A natural spring fed a pool of crystal-clear water, steam rising from its surface despite the winter cold. The moon hung directly overhead, impossibly bright, painting everything in silver. The first kings were claimed here, Theron said, setting her gently on her feet. Every Alpha King for 1,000 years has brought their mate to this place. Neve's breath caught. 1,000 years? The water is heated by the earth itself, blessed by the moon goddess. He cupped her face with both hands. But if you've changed your mind? I haven't. Neve rose on her toes, kissing him with all the certainty in her heart. I want this. I want you. The last thread of Theron's control snapped. He kissed her back with 300 years of loneliness finally allowed release. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and Neve whimpered as heat flooded through her body. Tell me if I'm too rough, he growled against her lips. You won't. Neve bit his lower lip harder this time, tasting copper. Stop treating me like I'm fragile. His eyes flashed pure gold. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. Theron's hands found her dress, and with one sharp pull, it tore away. Neve gasped, suddenly bare in the moonlight, but before embarrassment could take hold, she saw the expression on his face. Worship. Pure, absolute worship. Perfect, he breathed, hands skimming over her skin with barely restrained hunger. Neve reached for his shirt, tearing it open. Your turn. He helped her, and Neve's breath caught at the sight of him. Scars and muscle, and barely contained power. Then he was lifting her, carrying her into the pool. The heated water rose to their waists, steam curling around them. Neve gasped at the sensation, at Theron's hands on her waist holding her steady. The claiming, he said, voice dropping to that alpha rumble, requires both parties to mark each other, to bite and be bitten, to exchange blood and become one soul in two bodies. Neve nodded, unable to form words. It will hurt, he continued, lips finding her throat above the mark he'd already left. But I swear on everything I am, I will make it bearable. I trust you, Neve whispered, and felt his whole body shudder. Then give me your throat, Shalara. Let me claim you properly. Neve tilted her head back, baring her throat in ultimate submission and trust. Through the bond, she felt Theron's wolf surge forward, felt him become something more primal, more ancient. When his teeth sank into her flesh, the The pain was sharp and immediate. But this time, Neve was ready. This time, she embraced it. The bond exploded between them. It wasn't the gentle thread from before. This was a flood. Two souls crashing together with enough force to remake the world. Neve felt everything Theron had ever felt. Centuries of loneliness, of duty without joy, of waiting. She felt his awareness in the ravine, the instant he'd known she was his. Felt his restraint these past weeks, the agony of staying away. And beneath it all, she felt his love. Absolute, unconditional, eternal love. "My turn," she gasped when he released her throat, licking the wound closed. Theron's golden eyes met hers, and he tilted his head in mirror of her submission. "Make me yours. Complete the bond." Neve didn't hesitate. Her teeth found the junction of his neck and shoulder, and she bit down with all her wolf's strength. The taste of his blood was copper and magic and right. Power flooded through her, his power, freely given, the strength of an alpha king flowing into his mate. She felt her wolf transform, growing stronger, faster, and more dominant. "Because you're not an omega," Theron's voice said in her mind. "You're a queen, my mate, my everything." Neve released his throat, licking the wound, sealing it. The mark would scar. They'd both carry each other's claim forever. "It's done," Theron breathed, pulling her close until their foreheads touched. "The bond is complete. You're mine, and I'm yours, and nothing can separate us." Neve felt it. The bond, no longer a thread, but a golden chain wrapped around both their hearts. She could feel everything he felt, sense his every emotion, hear his thoughts. "I love you," she thought toward him. His response was overwhelming, a wave of emotion so pure it brought tears to her eyes. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until the moon falls from the sky. You are my heart, Neve. My soul. My mate." "Say it out loud," she whispered. "Please." Theron pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, hands cradling her face. "I love you," he said, the words carrying 3 centuries of waiting. "I love you, and I will spend the rest of our very long lives proving it." Neve kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude, desire, love, and the bone-deep knowledge that she was finally home. When they emerged from the pool hours later, the moon had begun to set. Neve's legs were unsteady, her body marked in ways both visible and not, but she'd never felt more powerful, more complete. Theron wrapped her in his shirt, then lifted her into his arms. "Ready to go home?" Neve looked back at the sacred pool, at the place where she'd become a queen. Then, at the man, the wolf, the king, the mate, who held her like she was made of starlight. "I'm already home," she said simply. His smile was radiant, transformative. "Yes, you are." They walked back through the forest together, the new queen and her king, their bond singing between them like music only they could hear. She'd run from a bond she didn't want, only to find herself claimed by the one she needed. She'd fought against destiny, only to discover that sometimes destiny knew better than fear. Sometimes you had to run as far and as fast as you could, not to escape your fate, but to finally catch up with it.